Okay, moving on to the next team in the Big Ten that we will be going over today. That would be Greg Gard and his Wisconsin Badgers. And it's crazy because Wisconsin is another prime example in college basketball of a team that, even if you start off the season pretty rough, it is a long season and you will always have the opportunity to bounce back and really change the vibes of your team. And to be honest with you, that is exactly what this Wisconsin Badger team was able to do last season. Now, for a little bit of a background, I was not high on the Badgers at all going into the season last year. I didn't love the fact that Ethan Happ wasn't coming back and the roster around him wasn't really proven in terms of guys that could score and create shots by themselves. Now, you look at the Badgers' schedule last year. Early in the non-conference schedule, they really struggled, losing to St. Mary's, losing to Richmond. How about this one? Losing to New Mexico, losing to NC State. They lost those 3 games all in a consecutive stretch. And I'm not going to lie, if there was any Wisconsin Badger fan that told you after that 4-game stretch that either they were really worried or they weren't very confident in Greg Gard and his ability to be the head coach, then I think they're lying, because Wisconsin last year, things were not looking good at all. Then all of a sudden they beat Indiana, lose to Rutgers, win a couple games during the non-con before Big Ten play, beating Milwaukee and Tennessee and Rider, and then all of a sudden during big play they really had some nice wins, beating Ohio State on the road, beating Penn State on the road, beating Maryland at home, beating Michigan State at home. How about this one? Beating Ohio State at home again for the second time, beating Purdue, beating Rutgers at home, beating Michigan at home, beating Minnesota, beating Northwestern, beating Indiana. And the crazy thing is, Wisconsin ended last season winning 8 games in a row. And ultimately, the question for this year's Badgers are going to be, can they replicate that, and who are the real Badgers? Because I would compare Wisconsin to UCLA. I think both of those teams are pretty similar in a sense that going into last season, they had coaches that, to be honest, I wasn't 100% confident in. I understand Greg Gard isn't a bad coach, but at the same time, it's not like he's a coach that I necessarily thought before last season could get you over the hump if your team isn't built to. And I do feel like with Greg Gard and the Badgers last year, early in the season, I wasn't too confident in his ability to make the team better and get the job done. But I really do like how this Wisconsin team rallied together. And not only that, but how specifically other players on the team were really able to find a role and improve. One guy I want to highlight, and I think this guy is the best natural creator scorer on this Wisconsin Badger team, that would be Nate Reavers. And one thing I love about Nate Reavers is not only do I think he's going to be the best player on this Wisconsin Badger team as an experienced senior who has played a lot of basketball, but at the same time, throughout his college career, he's gotten better and better. If you remember his freshman year, Wisconsin just was not very good. He did get a consistent chance to play, though. He averaged 5.3 points per game. His sophomore year, he averages 7.9 points per game in a bigger, expanded role. And then last year, he was really able to take off, playing 26 minutes per game, shooting 44% from the field, 33% from 3, 80% from the line, and averaging 13 points a game. And I do expect that trajectory to continue and Nate Reavers to go all out and ball out as the Wisconsin Badgers' leading scorer this season. Another guy that I think was very important to Wisconsin last year and how improved they got was Micah Potter, who was a transfer from Ohio State. He had experience playing in the Big Ten, and to be honest, there was nothing he did at Ohio State that made me say to myself, oh, I feel confident about him going into the Wisconsin Badgers program next season and making a significant impact, because that was another reason why before the season last year I wasn't really high on the Badgers, was the fact that they lost Ethan Happ and they didn't really have a big body to replace him just from a rebounding and size perspective, let alone from a pure scoring perspective. And Micah Potter, he's 6'10". I think he's a little more skilled than a big-time center, but at the same time, he really did the best of both worlds last year, providing Wisconsin with some consistent scoring impact as well as that consistent 5. And the Badgers' season really was able to turn around last year when Micah Potter was inserted into that starting lineup. And I do think if you're a Badger fan, it is reasonable to expect that to continue this year in a bigger role. Now, the only real player the Wisconsin Badgers lose that I'm a little concerned about is the guard, Brevin Pritzel. And he was a guy that if you have watched Wisconsin basketball over the last couple of years. You've been able to tell that he's a really good player, and he was really able to make three-point shots off the bench consistently, which, to be honest, not a lot of other people on this Wisconsin team were necessarily able to do. So I'm going to be curious to see if Greg Gard and the rest of his team could kind of find that guy in that role to be a knockdown three-point shooter. But the Badgers do also bring back two guards in the backcourt that started last year, including Demetric Trice and Brad Davison. And not only did these guys both start last year, but they've both started all 3 years throughout their college career, and they're very experienced. Demetric Trice is actually a redshirt senior. This is going to be his 5th season in the Badgers program, and he has just played so much basketball throughout his career. They also bring back Aleem Ford, and to be honest, I like that bigger lineup that the Badgers are going to be playing with a 3-4-5 of Ford, Reavers, and Potter. I think that's a very versatile lineup that could shoot and has good size. When you're playing two guys in Reavers at 6'11 and Micah Potter at 6'10 that are both huge and could shoot, that is something not a lot of other teams in college basketball could give you. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the vintage Wisconsin. Can they score in the half court? We know the Wisconsin Badgers aren't going to be a team that speeds up tempo. They have a clear formula, and I feel like if you're a fan of the Wisconsin Badgers, that is actually going to be a really good sign going forward, just because there are not going to be a lot of other teams around college basketball that have the ability to shoot the ball like that. And I do feel like after drawing concerns by many Wisconsin fans last year, including me, and the fact that Kobe King last year, he transferred. And to be honest, after Kobe King transferred, I thought, okay, Kobe King is a pretty talented player. I'm not 100% sure why he would leave all of a sudden, but I do feel like ultimately that was one of the main factors as to why the Wisconsin Badgers team was so good last year. And I do feel like the team kind of turned it around once he left, and sometimes you hear the expression addition by subtraction. And I feel like in this case, that is what happened here. Wisconsin clearly played better when roles became more clear for specific people. And when you look at it, Wisconsin, they are in a good position, I think, with the core they bring back to make a decent run in the Big Ten, just because they have experienced guys that have played together before, which not a lot of other teams around the Big Ten has. So I'm really looking forward to see what the Badgers could do this season. Greg Gard, the fact that in a span of about half a season, convinced me from being pretty skeptical on him and the way this team was going, and the fact that he turned the season around, and going into this season, I'm actually going to predict the Badgers to win the Big Ten. He deserves a lot of credit for that. He deserves a lot of credit for the way he built this roster. I think it really fits well together. My only other concern is the kid, Tyler Wall. And by concern, what I mean exactly is just that I'm concerned about the fact that they do lose Brevin Pritzel, who came off the bench and was one of their more consistent three-point shooters. But I think Wall could be a guy that comes off the bench and hopefully, if you're a Wisconsin Badger fan, duplicates that role. So I have the Badgers winning the Big Ten, coming in first. It should be a very fascinating season to see what exactly the Badgers could do.